And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a crazy weekend it was, especially in the state of Texas. Oh my goodness, crazy out of the bottle. The genie, whatever analogy you want to use, just how, wow, Texas, what is going on? Evidently, the Republicans there in their big convention passed a resolution. Evidently, Biden didn't win in 2020. No, they're doubling down. No electoral victory. Also doubling down. Texit is now going to be a thing. I guess we're going to look at a secession again. They keep doing this. We're going to go away. We're going to take our oil and go. Well, good luck feeding yourself. This is one of those kind of weird moments where crazy is running the asylum. And over the weekend, you had Dan Crenshaw, the representative, Republican, really, I would argue on the fringe of fascistic kind of, way out there, right wing, guy, being attacked as being a traitor. There were people literally yelling in the hallway to hang this guy. And you go, why? Oh, because he had the audacity to go, maybe we shouldn't have, kids being shot in schools. Maybe we might want to think of something on, I don't know, legislatively to do, maybe something. Look, this is getting to the point. The Republican Party has gone really, they've jumped the shark a while ago, but now it's blatant now. The violence, the rhetoric, they used to try and cover it. They used to try and hide it. Not anymore. And look, the reality is they're not anymore. You've got this Eric Greitens guy who, running for Senate in Missouri, released an ad where he's going on saying, we're, join the MAGA crew, get Rhino, literally talking about literally hunting rhinos. The words he used: join the MAGA crew, get a rhino hunting permit. There's no bagging limit, no tagging limit, and it doesn't expire until we save our country. While holding a gun, threatening to shoot Republicans. This isn't even Democrats. I mean, they've so jumped the shark that it's not even Democrats that they're going after. They're eating their own. And this is the weird kind of moment that we're in. Because if you're watching the hearings, all of those people who are testifying, those are the very best people. Those are the Trumpkin people. Those are people who were MAGA world. That's the elite of the Republican Party, who now you've got the Greitens of the world and these idiots in the hallway screaming, hang Dan Crenshaw. Look, I'm not a Crenshaw fan, but don't hang Dan Crenshaw. How about not? How about that's not how we have political discourse? Well, when you step back and you think about what the RNC said about January 6th, legitimate political discourse, when an insurrection, when building the gallows to hang the vice president, when assaulting police officers and doing the thing, defecating on the floor, the height of legitimate political discourse. When this is where we go, are you surprised? And the answer is no. I mean, and it's going to get uglier. Look, you've got Adam Kinzinger, who, look, he's getting out, and I don't know that I blame him. He said he's very worried that the next presidential election, 2024, going to be a mess. And you look at all of the conspiracy theories already out there. Nobody's even voted. Nobody's even considered voting yet. And yet, I got people saying, they're going to steal it. We know. They're going to steal it. Because like Joe Biden did. But all of the other all the other elections that Republicans win, those were perfectly legitimate. Because as I said from the beginning, Joe Biden is so intellectually smart and learned coding so well that during the pandemic, he was able to go into the computers stealth-like. And he was able to just steal those votes for himself. None of the other, because why would he want senators and representatives to help pass an actual agenda? No, because it's so much better to have a divided Senate that you can get nothing done. Boy, that's working so well. I mean, when you stop and you listen to the theories and you break down the craziness, oh my gosh, help. And it wouldn't, look, it would be hysterical, it would be laughable if it wasn't so sad and dangerous. Because, as Adam Kinzinger says, look, violence is coming. The reality here is the more of this insanity that's being fed, the more this kind of heated rhetoric that get, like Kinzinger said, violence is coming in the future. And he said, look, until we can get a grip on telling people the truth, how can we expect anything different? And look, we're in a moment where nobody believes anything because we have our beliefs. Because, we've been in these incestuous pools. Because I did my research on the internets. And this is the crazy moment that we're in. I mean, there are still people. I was talking to a guy today, big Trump supporter, believes only what Donald Trump says. And you go, are you paying attention to the hearing? Yeah, it's all lies. Even though everybody around Trump's sphere, all of the best people. Now remember, these are all the Trump people. These aren't, this isn't Adam Schiff testifying. This isn't Eric Swalwell. This isn't, Nancy Pelosi. This is the best people. Nope, don't believe any of it. How do you do that? Now, what's interesting is what's coming out of Texas, and look, it's going to get crazier because Texas is just now the beginning, I guess. Because evidently Trump isn't crazy enough. There's going to be violence. Judicial review, I guess, is now under review. I guess we're not going to have a court system if Texas has their way that can decide the rule of law. Like I said, the Biden presidency, Biden lost. They go on to describe homosexuality as an abnormal lifestyle choice that you know what's coming next. Christian Sharia law. And I've been saying that for the longest time. What they really want is they want this extreme, hyper-Christian, fascistic kind of Sharia law. So that they can, put blacks back in the fields, gays back in the closet, and women back in the kitchen. And then, of course, the secession. So I'm curious. Anybody got any thoughts? I'd love to hear it. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Is this a big deal, or is this, hey, it's just Texas. Just Texas being Texas. They do this kind of secession talk every once in a while when energy prices get up there and they think they can make a boatload of money. Is this that? Now, this week's going to be interesting because got two hearings from the January 6th committee. On Tuesday, going to look at what Trump did in the states and what the fake electors and the pressure that they put on state officials. Personally, I'm looking for what Brad Raffensperger has to say. And the perfect phone call, which, again, Trump doubled down on. It was a perfect phone call. Remember the last perfect phone call got him impeached? This I'm expecting, again. He wants to put on a defense. He wants equal time. And I got to tell you, I want him to have equal time. I want him to have equal time under oath. I want him to sit there and I want him to answer questions, not get to spew and do all the nonsense that he gets away with, but actually, answer questions. I think that's kind of important. Now, what's frightening in this is that you have this angry minority. And look, the far right, I'm looking at the polling, and the polling saying, look, a lot of people are looking at Trump and going, he's responsible for this. A lot of people are going, hey, the latest ABC News Ipsos poll, 58% think Trump should be charged with a crime for what happened on January 6th. 58%. That's pretty impressive. And it's going to go up as these hearings continue down the road. Curious your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are we doing today?
We're doing. I think that they have finally lost all contact with reality. But really, I think a lot of it is we have these hearings. And, they've been being fed this line of fantasy for the past, 40 years or so. And then you have Q stirring the pot. You have Putin sticking his fingers in the pie. And the only thing I have to say is if it wasn't for the fact that we know from history that when, this confederacy arises, but they don't just stop there. They go ahead and want to take all the rest of the states with them and attack everybody, because that's what the Confederacy wanted to do. They wanted to take over Mexico, parts of Canada, Cuba. If it wasn't for that, I'd say good riddance, build a wall between us. Mexico would probably build a wall between them and Texas. And just think the money that we'd save from lots of things, including natural disasters. But I honestly think that these people have lost all contact with reality. I was just reading an article where they were interviewing people in Texas, and a vast majority of them that they interviewed thought that John F. Kennedy was president and JFK Jr. was his vice president, and I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
So I honestly think that, we've got a really bad case of mental illness running through the United States, particularly in Texas. But, I don't know. The only thing I can say is, they act like they're the only ones that have guns. Do they really think that the liberals are just going to stand there and let themselves be shot? And as for the Republicans, they're on their own. They stirred this pot. Deal with it. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Alice. I appreciate it. No, I actually, this is one of those moments where I was just having a conversation with somebody who goes, I've never owned a gun, going to buy one. It's now getting to this critical mass where, congratulations, gun nuts. You're creating more of you, and you had it. You had the corner of the market. Now the fear level is ramped up. I mean, when Dan Crenshaw can't walk into a Republican Party event without being accosted, when it's when the Republican Party of Missouri, this is the amazing story of the day. The Republican Party of Missouri actually called the police on their Senate candidate, this Eric Greitens, who, former, Missouri governor, because he said, "Look, we're going to meet. This is a direct threat." And it's this kind of rhetoric when you go, "Well, no, he didn't mean it." Yes, he did. Yep, meant it. And if he didn't, he implied that somebody of mental. So here's my question. Let's say someone does, out of this ad, go and take out Dan Crenshaw or one of the Republican candidates. Should Eric Greitens be charged with a crime? Should we be locking him up? I'm curious your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a moment, never miss an episode. Subscribe, share, like, comment, all of that stuff. Also, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you got thoughts, I want to hear it. Quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I keep getting my head because I want to make a joke out of this Greitens thing. You know, like Elmer Fudd, you know, doing the we're hunting rhinos, but there's nothing funny in this. I mean, this is dangerous. This kind of heated rhetoric, especially in this moment, really, really dangerous. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. 3 sovereign citizens, you know, these upstanding morons, evidently arrested in California with some explosives. I wonder what they were going to do. They had military-grade improvised explosive devices. I wonder, you know, picnic, you know, maybe a family function, little, you know, Father's Day was, you know, just the other day, something. You know, maybe a little fun entertainment from our sovereign citizens. And look, get ready for this kind of stuff, this kind of terrorism. And look, during the Obama years, they were warning about this. And I remember, you know, people losing their mind over it. Going, oh, I can't believe Obama's calling white people terrorists. Going, yeah, cuz, hello, this stuff was going on. The planning of this, the organizing of all of this, that's what was happening. And again, the Trump sphere, they tapped into this and used these people to help divide us even further. It's scary stuff. Also on the rhino front, Lauren Boebert, gun fetish Barbie, back on January 6, 2021, she on Twitter blasted the infrastructure bill that she voted against. Said, quote, rhinos just passed this wasteful $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Pelosi did not have the votes in her own party to pass this garbage. Time to name names and hold these fake Republicans accountable. Well, just the other day, she sent a letter to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, writing, as the representative for the 3rd Congressional District of Colorado, I write in strong support for the city of Glenwood Springs request for rural surface transportation grant funding for the South Bridge project. I respectfully urge your full and fair consideration of this competitive grant application. Now remember, she voted against the infrastructure bill, but there she is, hat in hand, going, hey, you know, that garbage bill that I voted against, you know, my community could use some infrastructure funding. Could you spare a little, you know, maybe a little help for my community to help me get reelected? Maybe just a thought. See, this is where in Trumpkin world, she'd be punished. And this is what I've said from the beginning. If you didn't vote for it, you shouldn't get anything. You're against it. Nothing for you. So you can go back to your constituents and say, look, yeah, I was against it. It's a bad bill. There's nothing in it for us. We don't need anything. We're good. And then they could throw her out because we do need infrastructure improvements. But again, this is that heated rhetoric that, well, gets us even further apart. And the reason I focus on this division is I'm looking at what's going on around the world. A story just came out that China imported more Russian oil than it's ever done. China is basically keeping Russia propped up by funneling tons of resources through them. There is a global war going on right now. And sadly, we're getting crushed in this. And as we're divided here at home, as we're ripping each other apart, and we're ready to do battle with each other, neighbor to neighbor, families, and inside of each other. The Chinese are they're figuring out how to take over, and in a couple of generations, our grandkids and great grandkids are going to be speaking Chinese. And I wonder if the historians of that day are going to look back and go, how stupid were they? How stupid was that generation that they were fighting over who got to marry who, or what private decisions people made, or what people did in their bedroom, or what women did with their bodies? There's part of me that goes, will they look back on this and just go, how idiotic were these people? And we're descendant from them? We're on the same tree. Can we chop that tree down, please? Because look, as we're eating our own, the rest of the world's moving on without us. And it's going to put us in a much more dangerous position. And look, the Chinese, they're moving full steam ahead. I just saw a story that said that they've intercepted missiles in the air. Their military technology is getting so much better. And yet here we are still trying to hold on to our democracy, to hold on to our souls, to hold on to who we were. It's quite angering where we're going. And the question isn't, I come back to my Republican friends, because look, this is you. It's all you, buddies. It's all you folks. Your party's lost its mind. When you have a Republican convention, because look, Texas is going to be the beginning. This is the springboard. Other states now are going to have to up their game. You can now see, Alabama, Mississippi, Pennsylvania. They're going to have to up their game. They're going to have to double down on the Texas. Can't let Texas get all the credit for wanting to secede and bash the gays and do all that stuff. No, they got to get their street credibility. And all the while, what's happening is we're continuing to fall behind. We're continuing to not fund education and healthcare and infrastructure and do all the things that need to be done. We're continuing to be, divided. So how do we come back together? How do we move forward? That's the question. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also, if you miss any of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We'll take a quick break, right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day Ford Motor Company finally signed with the United Auto Workers. Ford was the last of the big three to sign with the UAW. The hard-won victory came after nearly 3 decades of struggle to organize there. Anyone attempting to build a union had been met with the full force of Ford's service department, led by thug Harry Bennett. Intimidation, Jew baiting, red baiting, firings, and beatings were common in the years leading up to unionization. Some unionists had even been murdered. The company finally caved after a solid strike shut down production at the massive River Rouge complex in April. Several union committee members had been fired, and the UAW called a strike in their defense. Tens of thousands of black and white workers poured out of their departments to join the picket lines. They blocked all plant gates with their cars. Strike bulletins, press statements, and radio broadcasts kept workers updated on the latest decisions. A week into the strike, the NLRB ruled an election be held within 45 days. Strikers went back to work on guarantees that their co-workers would be reinstated. The following month, the UAW won union certification after 60,000 rallied in Detroit's Cadillac Square in support. When Ford finally signed the first contract, it guaranteed competitive wages, a closed shop, and dues checkoff. The first contract also ensured seniority rights, grievance procedures, and pensions. The union immediately took advantage of the contract clause that prohibited racial discrimination. They set up a commission to combat racism on the shop floor, issuing anti-racist literature and backing the elections of black committeemen and stewards. Labor historian Steve Babson notes, it was a watershed in American history.
I never dreamed of growing up to be a political activist commentator, but here I am, and it worked out pretty well for me. I've been lucky enough to have a voice in public matters and eke out a modest living running my mouth as an independent populist agitator. Still, I have to confess to the sin of job envy. Not in the sense of being resentful, but regretful about my own inability to lift the trade of journalistic commentary to the heights attained by a small, feisty collection of unique public opinionators, political cartoonists. In framing issues and rallying people to think and act, these journalists have an unfair advantage over us mere word crafters. They can literally draw a picture to make their point. They reach masses viscerally as well as cerebrally, and visceral usually outpunches cerebral. Editorial cartooning is a profession made up largely of progressive mavericks who enter the social, political, cultural fray with an abundance of anti-establishment audacity, an eye for irony, fondness for the underdog, and an ability to laugh at absurdity, plus artistic talent. Because cartooning is an expression of the human spirit that's been irrepressible since cave drawings, generation after generation of pen and ink champions of democracy blossomed. The general public's appreciation and demand for the cartoonist's unblinking honesty and satire have never flagged, even increasing whenever the artists come under public assault by autocrats, plutocrats, screwballs, and assorted other censors. These graphic editorial artists matter. Again and again, they've roused the public to rise up and put down corporate and political scoundrels, incrementally advancing our nation's democratic possibilities. As in the natural world, though, even the most beneficial creatures can be driven to extinction. This is Jim Hightower saying, check your own local newspaper. Are your favorite cartoonists still there?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're in this weird moment, like I've been saying. The reality is we're divided as a country. And, for me, the way back has always been through work. The way back has always been through, bringing workers together, fighting for better wages, hours, conditions. I think a lot of our divisions, that's where we begin this. And, as I said last week, we were at the AFL-CIO's convention, and a lot of themes there that, hopefully the organizing happens. Hopefully the uniting happens. We'll see. But it's something that's going to have to happen and fairly quickly. Just something I'm very concerned about. But lots to get to. That's why I've asked Harold Meyerson to come talk with us. Harold is the editor-at-large over at the American Prospect. He's got a couple of really interesting pieces out on labor. One about Microsoft and Microsoft taking kind of a neutral stance in the organizing of their workforce, but also, in this moment of high labor approval ratings, why aren't we full balls to the walls going and organizing, folks? And doing, what my grandparents' generation did, what we talk about here all the time. Harold, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be here, Rick.
So, let's start with that. Let's start with the we're in this moment. This generation of young workers, they watch their parents get beat up over the last couple of decades, and they've had enough of it. And they're ready to, coming out of the pandemic, to say, you know what? We demand better. We don't just deserve, we don't expect, we demand better. And I'm just going, I'm not seeing the current labor movement taking advantage of that.
Well, yeah, that was a piece that I wrote along with my buddy Steve Greenhouse, who was a retired longtime labor writer for the New York Times. I think Steve and I are probably, the oldest guys on the block as far as that goes. So that gives us only one advantage, which is memory, historic memory. And what we both remembered was when new industries arose in the 1920s and 30s, after a period of not quite knowing what to do, labor was divided. And then, the head of the most powerful union, John L. Lewis, said, okay, enough of this. There are new industries. We need new unions in those industries. And I'm going to take my treasury, which was a pretty large treasury at the time, and hire a whole bunch of organizers, maybe 500, maybe 700, to organize these new industries into new unions. And those new unions became the United Auto Workers, the United Steel Workers, really the pattern-setting unions for the, beginning around World War II and on for the subsequent 30 years. Well, fast forward to today, and we have new industries, the tech industries, and they have just ballooned to the point that one of them, Amazon, is the second largest employer in the country in the private sector after Walmart. Much of labor has been pretty paralyzed there. And I think there's some cultural gaps too. We're looking at a workforce in those industries and others too, who are in their 20s. And this is, let us not blow this opportunity. This is the most pro-union generation, so as far as I can figure, in American history. In the most recent Gallup poll, Americans under 30 gave 77% approval rating to unions. I mean, you can't get a 77% approval rating these days for just about anything, for motherhood and apple pie. So this is a big deal. Also, at the moment, I think President Biden's best appointees are his appointees at the National Labor Relations Board, where the general counsel, Jennifer Abruzzo, is really moving heaven and earth to restore the National Labor Relations Act to what it once was. In other words, to be effective,
right,
to actually defend workers who are organizing so that it becomes a real crime, not just a crime on paper, which it always has been, to fire those workers because they're organizing. So, we have this opportunity. We have over 150 Starbucks that have now, the baristas have now voted to go union in NLRB elections. We have the first ever Amazon store in Baltimore over the weekend, which voted to go union in an NLRB election. We have the Amazon warehouse in Staten Island, which, to the shock of Jeff Bezos, voted to go union. And I think, and what Steve thinks, is that the thing for unions to do is take a lesson from John L. Lewis. New industries, new workers, fund them, give them organizers, let them go, give them the legal support, give them the financial support that they need, as Lewis did to steel workers and auto workers and rubber workers and so on. Don't be too concerned about which union they end up in, for God's sakes. The main thing is that the labor movement has been downwardly mobile for decades, so that now it's barely over 6% of the private sector that's unionized. If you can get that to 10%, if you can get that to 12%, if you can get that to 15%, it really would strengthen your union, even though they may not be in your union.
Right. No, so success breeds success. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, I think a lot of people actually think that what you're talking about is actually happening. So when I was at the convention in Philadelphia, because, I was expecting to see Amazon workers there. I was expecting to see Apple workers. I was expecting to see Starbucks workers. And I didn't see, maybe they were there. I just didn't see them. I was expecting to see a huge push of unity, but what I did see was a bunch of division within the organization. And I'm going, no, this is not where we need to be going, especially in this moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what's called a tragedy where I come from. It's not like this current wave among young people and this current burst of consciousness that the National Labor Relations Act is supposed to actually protect workers at the NLRB. These aren't engraved in stone and necessarily going to last forever. And look, right, in recent months in particular, the recent year, this has been a very good job market for workers. And with the Federal Reserve slamming the brakes on the economy, it ain't going to continue necessarily to be that. And it's when workers have some confidence that if they are organizing, if they strike, worst comes to worst, they can get a job somewhere else. That creates a more conducive situation to organizing than if the economy is totally in the dumps.
Right.
But,
so let me ask you this, Harold.
Yeah.
Because in looking at this moment, because I argue that this moment was created by at least a decade of organizing. Back in 2008, when the collapse happened, into 2009 and 10, I was going, we need to have the kind of organizing that we're now seeing, but we hadn't built the model. We hadn't built the organizations to do it. From all of the crises that have been happening over the last couple of decades, we had Occupy Wall Street, we had Home Defenders Leagues, we've had a bunch of these groups, propping up and learning to organize. This generation was raised on activism. This generation was raised on fighting for social justice. So, as things turn down, I think possibly their anger will turn up. I'm curious your thought.
Well, I think that's true. I would also add that this generation was raised on campaigning for Bernie Sanders, who said, look, you can run for office and get a hell of a lot of votes articulating real change, not just, incremental change. And I think that was part of what excited a lot of young people as well. I think it's there, but, they need the support. They need the support partly because no matter what the NLRB does, corporations, with very few exceptions, which we can get to in a bit, are just, they have it in their DNA that they're just, unions are an affront to civilization as we know it, is what most corporate leaders have come to conclude. It's not the case necessarily around the world. It's certainly the case here. But yes, this generation, I think there's more potential in this generation, which we've begun to see. Than has been the case maybe since the 1930s, maybe.
Yeah. I compare it to my grandparents' generation. My grandparents, my grandfather came back from World War II, fought fascism overseas, and then, went to the shop floor and fought for and built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. And we screwed it up. So now my kids' generation, they got to fight to rebuild what my grandparents' generation built.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And, again, what they forged in the 1930s and what they kept on winning in the 1950s and 60s, that was that generation. And it was really a fight. I mean, sometimes there's this image of the post-war years in 1945 to before the 60s. Though this is the quiet years, this is the Eisenhower years, nothing is happening. Actually, there were 300 major strikes on average every year during the 1950s. And that's how they solidified the gains that began in the 1930s. And yes, that was that generation. So you don't let up.
No, and to your point, I was fortunate that I got to know a lot of the old-time union organizers and a lot of the old-time union guys who would say, look, we went on strike every 10 years, whether you needed to or not, because people needed to cross out onto that picket line to know they fought for something. Because if you fought for something, you're not going to give it up. And a lot of people, we've taken the 8-hour day for granted. We've taken overtime for granted. We've taken healthcare benefits for granted. We've taken a lot of those things that they built and they fought for granted, and we easily gave it away because we didn't have to fight for it. Now this is a generation that's fighting for this stuff. And again, it's cyclical, but we'll see where it takes us. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Harold Meyerson. Harold is the editor at large over at the American Prospect. Make sure you check out their website, prospect.org. Lots of great stuff over there. Harold's writing's fantastic. One of my favorite writers out there. He's got a piece also out on Microsoft that you want to take a look at. Let's talk about this Microsoft bit. What's going on here? They're organizing drive potentially going on. They're claiming neutrality. Really? Are you buying that?
Well, they seem to be, and more important than my buying that, the CWA, which is a pretty damn good union as existing unions go, they're buying it too, because Microsoft signed an agreement with them that it wouldn't oppose a unionization effort at this company that Microsoft is currently buying, Activision Blizzard. That the CWA is behind. So a week ago today, as we speak, last Monday, Microsoft and CWA released a joint statement saying Microsoft would not oppose, and they would none of these captive audience meetings, none of these pressure campaigns on workers to unionize. They would not oppose these efforts, and this was preceded around the beginning of June by a statement from a guy named Brad Smith, who is the president of Microsoft, saying that they really wouldn't be opposed to unions generally, and that this applied not just to Activision Blizzard, but to the 180,000 people who work for Microsoft. So that raises some questions. Well, look, CWA played this smart. They filed a complaint when Microsoft first said it was buying Activision, saying, "Oh, this violates antitrust." Well, they took it off the table in exchange for Microsoft going neutral at Activision. But I tried to figure out what Microsoft's calculations were, and I came up with two things. First of all, precisely because it is making a purchase which might run afoul of antitrust, since the Biden administration is actually the first administration since God knows when that's actually wants to enforce antitrust rules. The fact that they would be okay with unionization and really vowed better pay and benefits for the Activision workers would make if there's opposition within the Biden administration, it would make it less. Yeah. But then I think there's another calculation. This is the kind of company that has to hire exactly the kind of workers we've just been talking about, Rick. Young, techies, smart. And look, the executives at Amazon can read. They don't have to read me. They can read the New York Times. They can read the Wall Street Journal. And they can find out that this generation is heavily pro-union. Okay, so how do they hire these workers and how do they keep these workers? Well, just maybe the fact that they're not going to oppose unionization makes them a little more desirable than Facebook, God knows, than Apple, than Amazon, than all of these other equivalent companies, which, the executives have made it very clear that if you want to join a union, they'll either get you arrested or get you fired. Well, that just might be an advantage for Microsoft if they're the one tech company that says, okay, you go ahead and form a union. We can handle it. Yeah, no, and it's not like these companies, for God's sakes, can't afford unions. They're making more money than God. So that
Yeah, but it's never about the money, Harold. It's always about the control. It's
exactly. No, if you look at Howard Schultz at Starbucks, he's made this a personal thing. He can give, he can take away. He's the creator, and the notion that anyone else can influence what he does, he views as a personal affront. Sharing a little power. God forbid.
Yeah, that guy could have been.
The sky is falling.
That guy was almost labor secretary.
Yeah, I know. Fortunately, Biden's labor appointees, particularly the NLRB, are, the best we've seen in a very, very, very long time. No. But I mean, these guys view this as like, a personal affront. And, Microsoft, for maybe the reasons I said, maybe other reasons I don't yet realize, Microsoft doesn't. Microsoft says, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll see where it takes us. But Harold, I appreciate you taking some time for us. You do fabulous work. I hope people will take a look at it. Prospect.org is the website. Harold Meyerson, editor-at-large there at the American Prospect. Make sure you check out the work that they do. Harold, great talking with you. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts with us down the road.
Happy to, Rick. You take care.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1943. That was the day that would go down in the history books as the 1943 Detroit Race Riot. The violence started on Belle Isle, a large island park in the Detroit River. Both white and black Detroiters were visiting the park on that hot, sunny summer Sunday afternoon. The fighting broke out among a number of the white and black youth. Such interracial fighting over the use of parks and recreation space happened frequently throughout the urban North during the 1940s. Soon, false rumors spread about white and black attacks on women and children. Fueled by these rumors, anger grew among members of both communities. The fighting spread across the bridge into the city. The next day, federal troops were called in to restore the peace. Over 3 days of fighting, 34 people were killed. 25 were black, including 17 killed by police and federal troops. 9 were white. The next month, the NAACP produced a report called What Caused the Detroit Riot, an analysis. They found that one of the biggest reasons for the sharp racial animosity was the influx of new black workers into the Detroit labor force. During World War II, Detroit's mighty car industry converted its factories to wartime production. As factory workers went off to fight, demand for labor soared. Southern labor, both black and white, were recruited to come north. Many white Detroiters did not want to work with the new African-American hires. From March to May of that year, there were 5 separate work stoppages by white laborers over black hiring or promotion. At the Packard Motor Company, nearly 27,000 workers walked off the job over the upgrade of black workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You know, I look at this moment, and for me, the organizing that's going on, it gives me hope. It gives me hope that maybe there's a chance. But again, I look at some of the insanity that we're seeing, out of places like Texas, and scary stuff. Let's go to the phones. We got Gary on line 2. Gary, how are we doing today?
Hi, Rick. Yeah, they were just talking about the fight in Detroit. You're right. A lot of Southern white, Southern blacks came to the auto industry, and Walter Reuther worked a lot to get them together. And the blacks went work with the union for a long time because Ford would walk around with George Washington Carver, and he was the only one to hire blacks. He was the worst one to unionize. And then finally the conditions are so bad, they had the worst jobs in the foundries, and they were dying young and stuff. Finally they got together and they went union. They took Ford down eventually. And like General Motors and Chrysler, they got union before them. They accepted the union, but they wouldn't make a contract till they got Ford. So he was the worst one of all. So anyways, Reuther, by the way, he's the one that suggested they do wartime production, and the bosses really hated that. A working man would be the one to bring that up. So And nowadays, the Republicans, they used to call us liberals, weak on communism or red itself, liberals in politics, and union people and Hollywood people.
Yeah.
And they're the biggest threat. I was told years ago the right wing is the biggest threat to our freedom, and that sure is true. And they're not the party of law and order either, as stuff you've been talking about January 6th.
No, they're the party of their law and order. As long as they get what they want, they're happy. But everything else, you're on your own. So are you concerned when you look at what's going on in Texas? Are you concerned that this they export that across the country and we see this rise in violence? I mean, you're in Minneapolis. Are you concerned that kind of craziness comes to your back door?
Oh, it's terrible, the white supremacy in the country and this religious right. They've always been dangerous. I knew that years ago. And they walk around with the Bible, and then they practice give everything to the rich. Jesse Jackson used to call it reverse Robin Hood, what these Republicans do.
Yeah.
Rob from the poor and give to the rich. So
it's what they do, Gary. I appreciate the call, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No, we're in. They say maybe you live in interesting times. I don't think I'd want this kind of interesting. I think can we tone it down just a little bit, just a little. Here's an interesting story. Over the weekend, you had about 2,000 cattle die in Kansas, and it's because of the heat. The climate is getting crazy, and they're concerned that the heat is just wiping the cattle out. And immediately my email box is filled up with stories of liberals are setting cows on fire. I'm going, where did you get this from? And the people who sent me this, they're not going to say where they got it from. Or they haven't told me. And I'm going, where is this coming from? Where is this insanity coming from? It's our climate problems. And then I came across this group, Citizens for Legitimate Government or something like this. Evidently, they're claiming there are over 100 fires that appear to be acts of sabotage at food facilities across the U.S. Speculation now running rampant about thousands of cattle that appear to have died suddenly in Kansas over the weekend. He says he called one of his friends. And one of his friends who owns several hundred cattle, he was aware of the mass death in Kansas event and has been discussing it with other cattle owners. He said, quote, I asked him if he believed the media story that these cattle suddenly died from heat exposure. His answer, I doubt it very seriously, that so many would drop dead at the same time. In a heat-related incident, he said, they wouldn't all drop dead at the same time. You would see a few dead at a time scattered across the herd, but not so many deaths all at once. When I asked him if he thinks they're natural deaths or something more like sabotage, he said, I'm thinking it's something nefarious. This was posed to me as an actual news story from the good folks at Citizens for Legitimate Government. This is where my right-wing friends get their news from. People who, this is news, man. I called somebody who said that's something nefarious. No, it's the heat. It's sweltering freaking hot. Maybe we should do something about that. Maybe we had some policy. Scary stuff. If you got any thoughts, questions, comments, I want to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, grab the podcast. Make sure you grab the podcast wherever you get your favorites, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that.
The war has reinforced an abject lesson. Our energy mix is broken.
The rush for new fossil fuel supplies is delusional, says UN chief. New study finds car tires are a surprising source of pollution. Plus,
if it hadn't been for the tremendous growth we had especially in solar the past few years, we would have already been experiencing rolling blackouts.
Rickety Texas electric grid bailed out by wind and solar.
All of those solar savior stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
This Earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us. It helps us to feed people. It helps keep people alive. It helps. The Earth is more green than it was years and years ago, and that's because of the Earth warming. That's because of carbon.
Oy vey. Yep, it's another Marjorie Taylor Greene News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I wonder what Marjorie Taylor Greene will tell the millions of people who are now broiling across the nation about how fantastic global warming is.
Indeed. The record-shattering heat wave this week has set ominous new records for overnight temperatures as well in several Midwest cities like St. Louis. And hot nighttime temperatures are especially dangerous, particularly in areas without widespread air conditioning. The extreme heat has also fueled new wildfires and new evacuations in Arizona and California. But there is some good news for Texans. Despite Republican attacks on renewable energy, wind and solar resources are bailing out the state's infamously deregulated electric grid, delivering 40% of total electricity needs amid record demand, keeping the power on and costs down, in part because the sun and wind are free.
Wow, solar and wind, 40% of Texas energy production?
Right now, yes.
Wow, that is impressive. You're welcome, Texas.
Meanwhile, Russia's war on Ukraine has pushed world governments to increase production of natural gas and build new infrastructure to export it to Europe. But a new study warns that while that could help slow natural gas prices in the near term, in the long term, new fossil fuel infrastructure is likely to slow down the transition away from fossil fuels and also runs the risk of locking in new emissions for decades to come, causing the world to overshoot the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature target in the Paris Climate Agreement.
And while it may keep prices down now, it's going to cost a hell of a lot more in the future. Don't tell Marjorie Taylor Greene.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres this week called the rush to exploit fossil fuels delusional.
Had we invested massively in renewable energy in the past, we should not be so dramatically at the mercy of the instability of fossil fuel markets now. Our world faces climate chaos. New funding for fossil fuel exploration and production infrastructure is delusional. It will only further feed the scourge of war, pollution, and climate catastrophe. Renewables are the peace plan of the 21st century.
Totally fake accent.
In other news, a new study finds that car tires are a significant source of particle pollution. In real-world road tests, researchers found that tiny particles shed from tires pollute the air, water, and soil with a wide range of toxic compounds at rates far higher than pollution from tailpipes. Currently, there are no regulations governing tire wear, but the scientists conclude that cleaning up just half of the most toxic tire brands would go a long way to eliminating tires as a source of pollution.
I'm just waiting for Marjorie Taylor Greene to tell us how particle pollution is really good for the earth.
Some good news. The Biden Department of Energy unveiled energy efficiency standards for inefficient residential gas furnaces, the first significant update in 30 years. The new standards will save consumers money by reducing energy waste and costs. The Los Angeles City Council voted unanimously to ban natural gas hookups in all new building construction beginning in 2026 to reduce indoor air pollution and the city's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions that cause man-made climate change.
So no more hookups in L.A.?
Nope.
Sad?
Finally, concrete is the world's favorite construction material, and its production accounts for nearly 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And if concrete were a country, it would be the world's third largest emitter.
Wow.
But engineers at Britain's Cambridge University say they have invented the world's first ever zero-emissions cement. The recipe is complicated, but essentially they combine recycling of steel and cement into a single process that, when powered by renewable electricity, eliminates nearly all direct carbon emissions. If it scales up, the process could be a game changer, cleaning up both the concrete and steel industries.
If it does scale up, that sounds like good news.
It is.
I think. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm still stuck on this Eric Greitens story. We're going rhino hunting. And the fact that the Republican Party of Missouri actually called the police on their Senate candidate. Because this is dangerous stuff. This is, at some point, I think, you would think your political leaders would be more responsible with their rhetoric. You would think that they would understand that there are some that may not get that this is just heated political discourse, or maybe he really wants people shot. Maybe he really wants to have people killed. But his tagline is, join the MAGA crew, get a rhino hunting permit. There's no bagging limit, no tagging limit, and it doesn't expire until we save our country. Who's going to save our country from people like Eric Greitens? That's my question. This guy, scary. People of Missouri, please do not vote for this guy. Not a great thing. Anyway, we should find out in the next, day or so whether there's going to be any gun sanity, any legislation that could possibly happen. I know that there's talk of a framework, possibly. I am not holding out much hope. But I'm not known as the eternal optimist. But we'll see what happens. But that's why I've asked Alex Barrio to come talk with us. Alex is the Director of Advocacy on Gun Violence Prevention at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org is their website. Alex, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
So let's jump into this. I want to start with the Greitens thing, because I got to tell you, this is, wow. This is frightening. This is a major political party's, a former governor, basically saying we're going to go kill people that we don't agree with politically. We're going to go kill them.
No, it's terrifying. I mean, for years, it has been understood by everyone in this country, every politician, that violence is the third rail. You don't touch it. You don't go near it. There's always another election around the corner. What we're seeing now is Republicans abandoning not just democracy generally, but also abandoning that principle and making political violence more and more normalized, and discussions bring it to the mainstream. And we know from history, from looking at what happens in other countries, where this leads to. It leads to innocent people losing their lives, and it's a really, really scary moment. I do hope that the Republicans in Missouri do reject Greitens in the primary. But, he has a colorful and terrible history as governor. As you probably remember, he was almost impeached before resigning because of domestic violence. And now he's trying to storm his way back, calling himself an outsider. And this is an incredibly dangerous human being to have on the political scene right now.
Yeah, let's call him an outsider and put him outside, way, way outside, away from, sane, rational people. Because this is, and I know part of me goes, he's just looking for attention. This was to get people's attention. But the reality is there are people who are going to look at this and go, well, he said to go do it. So my question then comes is, if someone of diminished capacity says, hey, Eric Greitens said we can go rhino hunting, and literally goes out and kills somebody, should he be held accountable?
It's tricky. And that's the issue that we're dealing with across the board with people like Tucker Carlson, right? Who is engaging every night with this great replacement theory, encouraging racial violence, but in such a way that he is allowed to disconnect himself from it and say, well, he's just talking. If this were to happen, Greitens could make the same argument, especially if it's somebody who has never met him or ever spoken to him or has no personal connection to him. And that's the real terror, right? And that's the terror that we all live in this country, of the randomness of mass shootings. So if he is to incite and inspire another mass shooting in our city, in our country, and anywhere, then is it really connected to him? He will have the plausible deniability to say, well, it's just political rhetoric, even though it is violent and terrifying, and it may have incited somebody. But I don't know that he will be held accountable. I personally think he should be held accountable, not just by the voters, but by the law. However, the law may see it otherwise. You know, this is still America, and we still have free speech. And sometimes that means terrible people say horrible things.
Yeah, but there's a difference between saying horrible things, but there are limits, and we agree there are limits on what you can say and the kind of, you can't threaten people. This to me, I think is a little bit out of bounds. Look, I'm a free speech advocate like anybody else, but this in this moment, when you're talking about the kind of, world we're in now, with the number of mass shootings we're seeing, the mental illness problems that we've got, the fact that some of this is going to be projected on, it's beyond irresponsible, and there's got to be something that deals with this. Just my thoughts on it, but I want to get your thoughts on this gun bill. Is there anything going to happen? I mean, I said from the beginning, there's no way we're going to pass anything on guns, and if we do, it's going to be something so watered down and weak, it's going to be ineffective. But I'm curious. You're the insider. You're the expert here. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
So we know that there are two big issues, right? Across broadly, Republicans are saying they want to work with Democrats to get something done, specifically on school security funding and mental health funding. But there are two huge sticking points. One is what is known as the dating partner loophole. Right now, if you are married to somebody or have a child with them and you commit domestic violence, are convicted of misdemeanor or felony domestic violence, assault that person, you are not allowed to purchase a gun again. However, if you're never married to that person and you never live with them and you have no kids with them, there is something you still are prosecuted with domestic violence charges, you are still able to buy a gun, right? And so that's the dating partner loophole. The law defines only these sorts of relationships forbid you from buying a gun, but these other sorts of relationships still allow you to get a gun. More than 50% of women annually in this country who die are murdered by an intimate partner. And so we know there is a link. These things do not happen in a vacuum. First there is violence, and then there is death. The Republicans are arguing that we have to be very strict about what a dating partner is. They're saying, well, it can't just be one date. So there have been conversations, is it a week? Is it a year? How long does it count to be a dating partner lose their rights? However, Republicans have also decided that if it is a dating partner, there should be a rights restoration process where these people can get their gun rights back and purchase a gun after a set period of time. And if they're going to do that for dating partners, it should be for all domestic violence assailants. So they want to open it up so that everyone who's charged with domestic violence after a few years can get their guns back. And we will not go backwards on this. It's too important of an issue. And to say that, it's worth a gun deal to try to go and, it's not a compromise as much as some Republicans might spin it as a compromise. But going back and allowing people who have threatened and physically harmed their intimate partner to get guns after a certain period of time is just too dangerous, especially when we're talking about people literally going to jail and then coming out of jail potentially during this period of prohibition and buying a weapon. So that's the first sticking point, and we don't know how that's going to end up. The second thing is on extremist protection orders, also known as red flag laws. There's funding in there for states that already have them. There's funding for states to create them. Republicans want to also create funding pools for states that do not want them for other things dealing with mental health, but that may not be directly related to gun violence prevention. This is really problematic in a place like Texas, where they have declared, for example, one example, that it is illegal to be a trans youth and are using the State Department of Children and Families to prosecute parents and take their children away. Can they argue through this funding if they get it, that they don't want to do an ERPO, and instead they're going to get mental health funding and then use that mental health funding to target trans families. They also have an abortion ban that is coming up. Can they use that to declare that women seeking abortions are mentally ill and target them? We don't know. They're opening a Pandora's box, and it's muddying the waters in terms of this funding. All we want is money for extremist protection orders so that people who are dangerous to themselves or others get their guns taken away from them for a temporary period of time until they get the counseling and mental health support that they need. Republicans are aggressively trying to change the terms of what that framework means now and broadening it, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
but we do know that. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's one of those things where I heard, well, there's a framework. I'm going, yeah, I'm not buying the framework. I understand how the whole system works. Frameworks break down over a very short period of time. So, look, I guess there's a couple of days here that possibly something could get done. What are you putting the odds at?
I'm going to put maybe 30% that something comes out tomorrow and gets done by the end of the week. They said they want to do something before 4th of July recess, which starts this Friday. And so they will be gone for 2 weeks. So they have to do something literally tomorrow in order to actually pass a bill before they go away, before the Senate takes its recess. If we don't get anything by tomorrow night, then there is not enough time for a Senate floor vote to do something before they go off for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, who knows?
Yeah.
You know, it could be a blessing. We might come back with an even better deal, or we might come back with a Democrats only deal. Unfortunately, we may end up seeing that there is no deal. I mean, I do know, though, that if there is no deal and if Democrats literally do nothing and let Republicans stop this, the consequences politically are going to be catastrophic.
I want to talk about that here in a second. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Alex Barrio, Director of Advocacy of Gun Violence Prevention at the Center for American Progress, americanprogress.org, the website if you want to check out the work that they're doing. We'll get links out on social media. So what would be the fallout? Because, look, you look at what happened in Texas. You basically had, people calling for Dan Crenshaw to be hung over, even talking about anything on the gun issue. On the left, I've got friends who are like, if we don't ban everything, it's going to be, heads will roll. Is there a compromise that can happen without, all what breaking loose? What does that mean when you say there's going to be, consequences?
Look, Democrats have for years been playing the waiting game and been very, very patient, Democratic voters, with their elected officials. Last week, we saw 1 million+ people march through March for Our Lives, Brady, Giffords, Everytown, all these different state organizations all over the country marching for change, demanding action. Democrats have the opportunity to take action, even through a filibuster. They can pass through reconciliation money for ERPOs to different states. They can pass money for school safety. They can go over the Republicans and go around them. If they refuse to do so, then they're spitting in the face of their voters, of their supporters, and ignoring the will of their number one, of their base, of parents and children who want something. I do think that the framework originally decided and announced by Cornyn and Murphy is a good framework for something real. However, if Republicans are going to once again act in bad faith and pull the rug out from them at the end of the day, Democrats cannot just sit back and take it. Like, they have to fight. They have to get something done, because otherwise, what are these parents going to do? If you can't trust our federal elected officials and you can't trust the Democratic Party, you can't trust the Republican Party for sure, what do they turn to? It's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, but at the end of this, the Democrats still have Joe Manchin. And, if Joe Manchin's name's on it, again, is it something that, the House is going to vote for? Because here's where my great fear is. You pass something that's so watered down that it's not going to stop anything. It's not going to make any real difference. And what ends up happening is the next time something does happen, it turns around going, see, you passed your law and nothing changed. So we can never do anything again. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, but I don't think that is how many Democrats see it ultimately. It's like, we know that extremist protection orders and we know that mental health funding for schools putting mental health counselors in every single school will reduce school shootings. We know ERPOs reduce gun violence. We know they reduce suicide. We know that our country is drastically underfunded when it comes to these issues, when it comes to real mental health support. And so, yes, putting funding there, not overnight. We still have 400 million guns in the streets, right? But a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, we will see dramatic impacts. We've seen it literally happen in other states that have done these policies, that have invested. Connecticut, Massachusetts, Hawaii, they have seen dramatic improvements, and the stats show it. And it didn't happen overnight, but it happened over the course of years. And now we're in a place where San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, New York are all safer than Jacksonville, Florida, or Jackson, Mississippi, or Baton Rouge, Louisiana, most cities in Texas. Like, we have seen the places where good policies implemented, they've been successful, and those streets are safer than cities where they have done nothing.
Now, the last question I've got for you: what do we do to make what do people do to get this pushed forward? What do we do to get this over the line?
I think if you're in one of those states where those 10 Republicans are, you need to call them. Call your moderates. If you're in Maine, obviously, if you're in West Virginia, if you're in Arizona, if you're in Texas, call Senator Cornyn's office. If you're in North Carolina, Tillis and Burr. Ohio, call Senator Portman. Call your senator. If you're in Missouri, besides Greetings, the senator who is there now, call that senator whose name escapes me. I apologize, who's retiring. Yes. And in Pennsylvania, call Senator Toomey. Toomey was on the Manchin-Toomey bill. He supported universal background checks. He's in this committee now. Call your senator and tell them, look, we cannot sit back and do nothing, especially when there are continued shootings every single day. People should not have to live in fear of going to the grocery store, of going to school, of going to summer camp. There was a shooting here in D.C. yesterday at a concert. On and on. Like, it's not fair to us as American citizens to continue to live like this because these politicians are owned by the NRA and they're buying into these lies of the gun lobby.
There you go. Alex, I appreciate the time. I'm hoping for the best. As I said, I'm a little jaded, but I am hoping for the best.
Thank you. And
appreciate
me too. I'll keep praying.
Appreciate the time. Alex Barrio, Director of Advocacy there at the Center for American Progress for their gun violence prevention program. Check out their website, americanprogress.org. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at the work that they do. Excellent stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got any hope, any thoughts? You think something could happen? You think it's going to matter? I'd love to hear it. Also, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a moment of the program. Get the podcast wherever you get your favorites. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Back after this. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm looking forward to the hearing on Tuesday. As I said earlier, I want to hear what Brad Raffensperger has to say, the Secretary of State of Georgia, and the perfect phone call. You know, it's got to be. And look, you know, I give people credit for doing the right thing when they do it. Mike Pence, I've given credit for doing the right thing. Not too much credit. I understand, not too much credit, because he should have immediately, when they said, hey, Mike, do this, he should have said immediately, viscerally, no. Immediately. Should have, conjured the spirits of Nancy Reagan. Just say no. But he didn't. He flirted with it for a while. Had to go search out the potato guy. Had to find Mr. Potato Head, Dan Quayle. Had to go find a conservative judge who said he'd lay his body down over the road before he let him do it. Had to find a bunch of people to give him a spine. So while I give him credit for ultimately doing the right thing, it was a process to get there. This is, one of those kind of situations where, you've got these people who it takes some work to get there. And making sure that we push them in a direction that has to be done. Now, I look at Raffensperger, who did his job. And I would argue did his job so that he wouldn't go to jail. Now, before the election, did everything he could do to, kick people off the voting rolls, did everything that the Republicans wanted him to do to, you could argue steal the election before it even started. The reason I call him, Raffensperger is because they were purging people in Georgia like crazy. They were part of that whole cross-check thing, the Kobach thing, where, hey, you haven't voted in an election, we're kicking you off. But when the President of the United States calls you and says, hey, I want you to find me 12,000 votes. I want to hear from this guy on what that was like. I want to hear what emotions, what viscerally the guy went through. Because he's just the Secretary of State of, Georgia. Very few people knew his name before. And to have Trump put the full court press on him, and understand, when MAGA world puts the full court press on you the way Trump did, that's power. It's influential. And for him to have done the right thing at the moment, I think is important. I think he deserves credit for that. Hero status, I don't know. Did enough to keep himself from not going to jail. Good for him. You would hope that from the law and order folks. But I want to hear his story. I want to hear the lengths at which Trump went. I'd like to hear the perfect phone call. I think we should be able to hear the perfect phone call. And then maybe put yourself in that moment. I mean, stop and think, what would you do? If you're Mike Pence, what do you do? You've got a whole bunch of people whispering in your ear, hey, you can do this. Hey, you have the power. You can change history. I mean, so, the fact that it took Pence really a long time to decide to do the right thing tells me that he was flirting with it. He was playing with the idea. But Raffensperger, no, he didn't do that. He came right out. This is going to be an interesting moment. And I want to hear what other states that he strong-armed. I'd like to hear what they did here in Pennsylvania where I'm at. How many representatives here? How many state senators? Maybe a gubernatorial candidate. How deep in is Doug Mastriano in the whole scheme to overturn our elections? And the electors, the fake electors that they came up with, the sham electors. That's what I'm looking forward to. I'm still hoping there's going to be a whole hearing on the money, though. I want to know who funded it still. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of the program, grab the podcast, share it with your friends, subscribe, like, share, all of that stuff. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2 on On this day in labor history, the year was 1943. That was the day that would go down in the history books as the 1943 Detroit race riot. The violence started on Belle Isle, a large island park in the Detroit River. Both white and black Detroiters were visiting the park on that hot, sunny summer Sunday afternoon. The fighting broke out among a number of the white and black youth. Such interracial fighting over the use of parks and recreation space happened frequently throughout the urban North during the 1940s. Soon, false rumors spread about white and black attacks on women and children. Fueled by these rumors, anger grew among members of both communities. The fighting spread across the bridge into the city. The next day, federal troops were called in to restore the peace. Over 3 days of fighting, 34 people were killed. 25 were black, including 17 killed by police and federal troops. 9 were white. The next month, the NAACP produced a report called What Caused the Detroit Riot, an analysis. They found that one of the biggest reasons for the sharp racial animosity was the influx of new black workers into the Detroit labor force. During World War II, Detroit's mighty car industry converted its factories to wartime production. As factory workers went off to fight, demand for labor soared. Southern labor, both black and white, were recruited to come north. Many white Detroiters did not want to work with the new African American hires. From March to May of that year, there were 5 separate work stoppages by white laborers over black hiring or promotion. At the Packard Motor Company, nearly 27,000 workers walked off the job over the upgrade of black workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I never dreamed of growing up to be a political activist commentator, but here I am, and it worked out pretty well for me. I've been lucky enough to have a voice in public matters and eke out a modest living running my mouth as an independent populist agitator. Still, I have to confess to the sin of job envy. Not in the sense of being resentful, but regretful about my own inability to lift the trade of journalistic commentary to the heights attained by a small, feisty collection of unique public opinionators, political cartoonists. In framing issues and rallying people to think and act, these journalists have an unfair advantage over us mere word crafters. They can literally draw a picture to make their point. They reach masses viscerally as well as cerebrally, and visceral usually outpunches cerebral. Editorial cartooning is a profession made up largely of progressive mavericks who enter the social, political, cultural fray with an abundance of anti-establishment audacity, an eye for irony, fondness for the underdog, and an ability to laugh at absurdity, plus artistic talent. Because cartooning is an expression of the human spirit that's been irrepressible since cave drawings, generation after generation of pen and ink champions of democracy blossomed. The general public's appreciation and demand for the cartoonist's unblinking honesty and satire have never flagged, even increasing whenever the artists come under public assault by autocrats, plutocrats, screwballs, and assorted other censors. These graphic editorial artists matter. Again and again, they've roused the public to rise up and put down corporate and political scoundrels, incrementally advancing our nation's democratic possibilities. As in the natural world, though, even the most beneficial creatures can be driven to extinction. This is Jim Hightower saying, check your own local newspaper. Are your favorite cartoonists still there?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I think my favorite story of the day, Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, had a term limit pledge. If you remember, he promised he was only going to run for, I think it was 2 terms. He had term limits. He was a staunch believer in term limits. But he has broken that pledge because, according to him, he didn't want to do it. He did not want to break the pledge. Did not want to break his because, Republicans big on pledges. Didn't want to break the pledge, but there were people just coming up, crying, sobbing They didn't want to do it. Streaming, tears down the eyes, bawling. Please, please, you got to help save the country. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it even a little bit. But hey, if this is what he's pitching, then maybe someone will buy. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Maybe a little preview of the big January 6th committee hearing going to happen on Tuesday. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come give us some thoughts. Former Ohio Congressman, political analyst. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So the term limit pledge, not such a pledge.
Well, now one thing now about the story, there is accuracy to it. It was his wife and his mortgage company that were crying and begging him to stay. So let's be candid about this. All right.
Okay.
I saw this happen so many times when I was in Congress. First of all, I never committed to term limit myself, ever, whether it was state rep, state senator, or in Congress. I said, people make term limit decisions. Because if you look at the history of term limits, people are, not all of them, I don't want to stereotype every member of a legislature, or something, but when you have them, like Ohio has term limits, Rick, then somebody angles for the next move, the next position, the next job, and I think they truly lose, some focus on it. So I never did like them.
Yep.
Now I did support when the contract for America came about. If everybody would adhere to them, fine, but I never would take a pledge because people back out on them. Not everybody, but most of them. And what they do, they say, oh, well, the constituents are writing in, or they start a movement, or their friends start a movement. That's what happened.
Yeah. No, I'm a believer.
It changes very little. I think it makes people more aggressive.
Yeah, I believe in term limits. We have the ultimate term limit. It's called
Voters.
the right to vote. If
Right.
you're not doing your job, we throw your behind out. We've limited your term by voting you out. I don't think that. And my other problem with the term limit stuff is what happened like in Michigan when Michigan rammed through their no right to work law. You had a bunch of people who were looking for their next gig on the way out the door, and they had no accountability left. So hey, I need a job. Yep, I'll throw the vote that way. No, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. But I would have liked to have seen Ron Johnson go, and I'm still hoping the good folks of Wisconsin, come November, throw him to the curb.
I think he when did he start didn't he start in January, the sort of reversal?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
He was building it up.
This has been coming. There have been a lot of tears, I guess. Like you said, the mortgage company. But this is a rich guy. I mean, this guy's loaded. All right, let's get to it. The big committee hearing on Tuesday. We're going to find out. I'm really looking forward to hearing what the administration, the Trump administration, was doing to the states, to like Brad Rassenparger, what they were doing in Georgia. I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I think the vulnerability that former President Trump has is twofold, and the one is recent is Georgia. And I saw the notes of the former Watergate prosecutor was talking about Trump and how he would try to say, well, that's not what I meant, in the statement of finding X amount of 17,000 some votes. I always did feel from 2016 that New York State was going to be eventually one day, after he left the presidency, I figured, a problem. And New York State is a problem. But the second thing now is the Georgia issue. And I think it is a problem. Depends on how Georgia, wants to approach it, or if the feds are there, put pressure or take a look at it too. So I think when you read, the transcript of what he said, it's alarming, to say the least.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the perfect phone call, though.
Well, it was a beautiful phone call.
It was a beautiful phone call.
Remember, beautiful and perfect.
Yeah. Now he's going on this defense tour, which of course he's going to do. He wants equal time, which I think he should have equal time as long as he's under oath. I say give him as much time as we can possibly give him.
That's the other thing. Once you get under oath, look with Bill Clinton, The Supreme Court made a decision which I disagreed with at that time. I disagree with it today. You don't compel a president in a civil case when he is president to testify. You don't do that under oath. And I've said that, tons of times. But the Supreme Court ruled, and the rest is history. And with Trump now out of the presidency and to be deposed, and statements he will make, it can become then an extreme problem. And also, if the phone call is made across state lines, you know what that involves? Then it involves the Fed.
Let the fun begin. Now, he's making this defense, and I've heard this from a lot of his supporters, that the hearing's all one-sided. That there aren't people like Jim Jordan or Jim Banks aren't on the committee. They don't have Trump's people on there, and that McCarthy, and Trump actually said, McCarthy was stupid or foolish, I think was the word, for not having his people on the committee. I'm curious from a tactical standpoint. I said from the beginning I wanted people on there so you could just turn to them and go, hey, what were you doing on that day? But was this a tactical error, or was this something where you could go, hey, it is one-sided, we don't have anybody? Was this strategic? I'm curious where you would have gone with that.
Well, it was a tactical error. You never ever boycott. When people would walk out of it never happened in any of my hearings. But people walk out of a hearing and we're going to you don't boycott. You sit there and you bring up your arguments. We had a situation one time on minority rights, and we were all to go. I was going to go with Sheila Jackson Lee and some other members. I think we were going to, my memory serves me right, Africa, right? And it was an international UN thing about, human rights, etc. Well, the technical host of the event, this is during the Bush administration, was Cuba. And because, we, quote, don't like Cuba, until Barack Obama, then the event was boycotted by the State Department, so therefore they couldn't authorize the trip. And we sat there and we're like, this is ridiculous. We excluded ourselves from an entire event because we didn't like a certain thing. So I can give you tons of examples where in rare cases maybe it would be okay, but you don't do this. It was a strategic mistake. Now, Trump had to blame McCarthy, Rick, because he can't just say, well, the Democrats didn't allow us. Yeah. McCarthy boycotted the event. Right. If McCarthy's mistake is he should have had his people there. Now, I know they would have become inflamed, et cetera, but it still is better to have your end of the statement at the table than to ignore it.
No, I said the same thing. I said you put your people on there. But there's also part of me that goes by saying we're not playing. You could say it's a one-sided witch hunt, which is what the only card they have left to play, which is what's resonating with MAGA world. Yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to see what comes out of the next round of the very best people, because again, these are all of the Trump world folks. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Bob Ney, political analyst, former Ohio congressman, talking about the big hearing going to happen on Tuesday. Also, were you paying attention over the weekend to what's going on in Texas? I guess Texit thing going to possibly happen where Texas is looking at seceding, looking at I guess Biden isn't legitimate. Again, bashing the gays again. A whole bunch of craziness. Christian Sharia law on the future docket. Lots of fun in Texas.
Well, you always hear this. Texas, of course, it was a republic from like 1836 to 1845. But the Civil War established that a state can't secede from the Union. Is actually what happened, and but in June, the Texas State Republican Convention adopted a resolution urging the legislature to put a referendum before the people of Texas in 2023 to determine whether or not the state of Texas should reassert its status as an independent nation, which is absolutely just simply bizarre. To bring that, they brought it up officially.
Yeah, is it wrong to say go?
Now, look, on the other side of this, when Hollywood actors and actresses well, if, Donald Trump gets elected, I'm going to leave. And people are like, oh, okay, that one can go, this one can. Of course, I don't think anybody left. But people do this. If Joe Biden gets elected, I'm going to leave the country, and they normally don't. But with this one, I'm actually amazed that they would do this, because how many people these days in the Republican Party in Texas, for example, say, well, the union's not perfect, but if you've got complaints about minority rights, you should still want to be in the country. They say it, right? They say that all the time. You should want to be here. What, you're anti-American. You want separate this or separate that. But here they stand and they make an issue to potentially, urge the legislature to pull away from the union. It's amazing. I don't see where this gets them any moxie whatsoever amongst the average citizen in Texas. I just don't see it.
See, but here's
it's weird.
I see it a little bit differently. I think the Republican Party has gone so far off to the extreme that I see other states going, let's go our direction, and this kind of craziness, because I'm sure you saw over the weekend the just the chaos that was going on there. I mean, your former party has kind of lost their mind.
Well, they're attacking members, and you can disagree with members, but
they're talking about hanging. They're talking about hanging someone like Dan Crenshaw. You got this guy who's running for Senate in Missouri talking about a rhino license to go shoot Republic. What?
Well, also Tucker Carlson started this, but I find it absolutely nauseating, and I don't care who it is or how much you dislike him, to call him Eye Patch McCain. He lost his eye. I mean, why would they do that? Why? And they were screaming that at him as he was going down through the hallway.
Now remember, this is a guy who we put on a pedestal called a hero. This is a guy who fought for the country. I mean, this is
right.
This is somebody who we photo opt. This is somebody who look. I respect his service. Policy wise, I don't agree with anything virtually with him on, but this is extreme. When you have people literally yelling that he's a traitor and you're going to hang him, you want to hang him?
Right. And also, like I said, making fun of his eye patch, and it was the Proud Boys, and that's the other thing I don't. First of all, the name is so silly. It's a goofy name, Proud Boys. It's just stupid. But why are they tolerated to be? I mean, for them to be at these events, when if you looked at the first night of the January 6th hearing, you've got to wonder why on earth they think they can still associate, they meaning the party radicals, think they can still associate with these people, and that somehow in the process that it's going to get them any type of moderate votes or any type of independent votes. How can they think that way? I don't get it.
I don't know. It's gonna. We're in for weird times. I mean, am I being hyperbolic when I worry that violence is potentially just around the corner when you look at look at the Greitens ad, the guy who's running for Senate in Missouri. I mean, you've run campaigns, you've run numerous times. Is this not out of bounds?
Well, I think it is. I'm not sure there are any bounds anymore. I mean, I saw Marjorie Three Names, and I saw her doing this goofy podcast, and the things she was saying, I mean, were just absolutely outrageous. They say things that tend to go, towards violence. But no, I agree with you. In fact, the violence around the corner, we had it in the Capitol. It was the worst attack on the Capitol. The last time we had a bad attack like that, it was called the British.
Yeah, no.
Coming back to take the country over.
Wow. So last line of questioning I've got for you. In looking at the hearings, what are we expecting coming out of the hearings? What are you going to be looking at? What are you going to be looking for?
Well, definitely going to look towards the process of Donald Trump plotting fake electors And I think what they're going to do is they'll be able to, on this fourth hearing, that Donald Trump and his top advisors had a scheme, and it was coordinated. That's the 2 points. It was a scheme, it was planned, it wasn't accidental, and it was coordinated. And they were going to send fake slates of electors as part of the effort to put him back in the White House. So they're going to examine about those fake slates of electors because they actually exist. That's not some type of hearsay. They exist. And they're also going to look at the Trump campaign arm about its facts that they have about pressuring top officials in 7 battleground states to corruptly, to illegally reverse his defeat in 7 states. And so I think it'll be, a lot on the scheme, how it was planned, who was planning it, and how they were going to do it to actually overturn the electors. Now, with this fake elector scheme, when we watch this, I think that the point will be made is, was it illegal? It may have been illegal, and that's the underlying basis for Trump's strategy to have Pence refuse to certify. Now, think about this, Rick. Why was he so hot on Pence refusing to certify? Because they had a scheme that when Pence would do this, then they would have these fake electors. And then you call the election, and how's anybody going to stop the violence, the anger that would occur after that?
Yeah. No, he
Which
laid it
brings me
out.
to the point of a horrible thought of the military deciding who sits in the Oval Office.
No, they laid it out when he was in Allentown, for giving a speech. He laid it out. If we can just get it into the House of Representatives, we're going to win.
Right.
He laid it out. He was very open. I mean, it's one of those things you give Trump credit for. He's on a certain level, he's kind of honest. I mean, he's kind of got diarrhea of the mouth. If it goes in his ear, it's coming out his mouth.
Right. Well, here's the other thing about this, too, that we're going to pay attention to, and when the electors met at the state houses in these 7 states to formally name Joe Biden as the president, and in 7 states, I want to mention 7 because I think it's going to show a planned scheme in 7 definite states, is what they're saying, then illegitimate Republican electors showed up. They physically showed up, and they said they came instead to make Trump the president. Now, they were turned away, but they then proceeded, after being turned away, Rick, to sign fake election certificates declaring they were the duly elected and qualified electors, certifying Trump. And that was a conceived scheme. I think that's what the committee will prove. And why is that a big deal? Because it would have made 2 competing dueling elector stats. And then you have a problem.
No, and I asked the question right from the beginning. Why on the next day, why on the 7th, weren't all those people arrested for submitting false documents?
Right. And once we know this scheme, which I just outlined, which is it happened, it's going to be shown tomorrow, then there's one question after that. Will the committee show evidence of the president's involvement with members, of course, of the White House and the campaign?
The intrigue.
That's what we're going to watch.
Now, well,
it's a big deal.
Look, I know the Jim Jordans of the world are saying nobody's paying attention, but when the latest polling I see coming out says 58% of the country thinks Trump should be charged for a crime for what happened on January 6th, somebody's watching.
And here's the bottom line of what we're going to also hear, Rick. We all know you can't falsify a voting document. We did the Help America Vote Act. We went over all the documents. We have attestations that Steny Hoyer and I put into law about falsification because we wanted to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. And one of the main components is, trying to stop falsification of a voting document. Well, guess what those people did who showed up and signed? They falsified a voting document. Now, that is mail fraud or conspiracy at best to do what? To defraud the United States, the electoral process. That's what it is. And that's a crime. And I'm not sure why somebody hasn't been charged up to this point.
Hello, Merrick Garland.
Something. Maybe this will put pressure. But I think I just laid out a scheme, that's been out there, and then when you put all these pieces together, it's highly, illegal. Again, anybody listening to the show, go falsify a voting document and see what they do. They'll come after you.
Yeah.
So why are these people exempt?
That's the question. Why are they exempt? You're absolutely right. But, Bob, I appreciate the time. Looking forward to the big hearing and your analysis on the other side. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, our good friend Bob Ney. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. Working people come to talk. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. So looking forward to the big hearing. I keep asking that myself. Why is it that those people who signed the phony elector slips, why is it taking so long? Why did these folks get such leniency? Why aren't we locking them up? It's a fascinating question because clearly broke the law. And, I'm glad these hearings are going on. I'm glad they're presenting them in the way that they're doing it. These are again, all the Republicans' voices. And we're in an interesting moment because I do believe the Republican Party is trying to figure out how it saves itself. I do believe that there are forces within the party, and I welcome that. Please, if you're sane and rational, Republicans, take your party back. We need you. We need sane, rational, honest conservatives. What's being presented as conservatism today is just hate and anger. What's being presented as conservative is not. I truly, respect people of principle. But this is the kind of anger, the kind of threat level that's gone up here. I look at, someone like Adam Kinzinger saying, the next election is going to be a mess. Violence is going to happen. He doesn't strike me as someone who's hyperbolic. He doesn't strike me as someone who's just making stuff up. He's getting death threats. And for people, like I've gotten death threats from people. I've had people, threaten me in various ways. It's not nice. But I imagine, someone like him at that level, the kind of vitriol, the kind of anger, the kind of, because look, Trump and his ilk have wound people up into believing that they're fighting for the heart and soul of their country, whatever that vision is, whatever fantasy, whatever illusion that they seem to be deluding themselves with. This is where I keep coming back to. We have got to be the sane, the rational, the lucid. Have got to be voting. We've got to be standing up. We've got to be speaking out. We've got to be talking to each other. We've got to be fighting together, not with each other. Simple to me. Love to hear your thoughts, though. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Something I said got under your skin. Want to hear it? Something enlightened you, made you think a little bit. Want to hear it? rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you grab the podcast if you miss any of the show. Get that wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.